What if the Soviet Union never fell apart? A question for the ages that we all wish to answer. If the communist dictatorship of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics never ended, how would it look? Better than it was, much worse, or perhaps the same?
The Soviet Union itself is no more.
What if that never happened? For starters, it wouldn't look like this. But it will still look like this. These guys would have never taken charge. And this guy would have most likely been in charge for a while. However, it was Gorbachev's politics that led to the Soviet Union dissolving. So what could he have done differently that would lead the Soviet Union to not dissolve? Gorbachev had ideas of reforming the Soviet Union through his ideas glasnost and perestroika, meaning openness and restructuring. However, through these policies, instead of reforming the Soviet Union, he ended up dissolving it. Glasnost, which means openness in Russian, was a policy of increased political openness and transparency. It aimed to promote freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and greater public participation in political discourse. Under glasnost, censorship was relaxed, and previously banned or restricted literature, art, and cultural expressions were allowed to be disseminated. This policy brought significant changes to the media landscape, allowing for more critical reporting and public discussions about social and political issues. However, it also led to the exposure of long-suppressed information about the Soviet government's past mistakes and human rights abuses. Perestroika, meaning restructuring, was a set of economic reforms intended to modernize the Soviet economy by introducing elements of market-oriented practices. It involved decentralizing economic decision-making, allowing for limited private ownership and entrepreneurship, and promoting foreign investment and trade. The goal was to make the Soviet economy more efficient, innovative, and responsive to consumer needs. However, the implementation of these reforms faced significant challenges, including resistance from entrenched bureaucratic and party elites, as well as the complexities of transitioning from a centrally planned economy to a more market-based system. Since these failed to play out in Gorbachev's way, what could he have done to continue the existence of the Union? You guessed it, the very familiar iron fist. For the Union to have stayed intact, Gorbachev would have continued the forceful leadership of his predecessors. Through this method, he could have kept a tight control on power for years like his predecessors. It worked in the past, so it could have kept working. However, that is never a guarantee. So what could have Gorbachev done to keep the Soviet Union developing, yet still hold a tight grip on power? For the Soviet Union to continue and grow, Gorbachev would have to adopt some of China's methods of development, one being introduction of market-oriented principles, the encouragement of foreign investment, and the establishment of special economic zones to attract international capital and technology, along with gradual trade globalization so the Soviets can open up their economy to global trade and investment. Secondly, the Soviet Union would have to transition to state capitalism. The USSR's economic model would be characterized by a unique blend of state control and market mechanisms, often referred to as state capitalism. The government would maintain significant influence over strategic industries and key sectors of the economy, while allowing market forces to play a growing role in resource allocation and production. Thirdly, selective political liberalization. Through this, unlike glasnost, there would be political reforms at a lower level, such as votes for city mayor. Generally, small amounts of democracy, but maintained authority over the country. Fourthly, emphasis on technological innovation. The USSR would place a strong emphasis on technological advancement and innovation as a key driver of economic growth. The government would invest heavily in research and development, promoting indigenous technological capabilities and fostering a competitive edge in emerging industries such as telecommunications, artificial intelligence, and renewable energy. The USSR would pursue an active role in international diplomacy, trade, and investment, seeking to expand its influence and access to global markets, including efforts to build infrastructure and trade linkages across Asia, Africa, and Europe. The USSR approach to achieving greater freedom and economic power would be marked by a complex interplay between economic liberalization, state control, selective political reforms, and global engagement.
Многое сделать лучше, но я уверен, что раньше или позже.
With all previous factors having been adopted into political use, the Eastern Bloc would have never broken apart due to the lack of political freedom. Originally, the Eastern Bloc's dissolvement heavily contributed to the Soviet Union falling apart, so keeping it intact heavily benefits the Soviet Union. We know the Soviet-Afghan War was a big reason for the Soviet Union's end, since the war cost lots of lives and money, ultimately leaving people upset and starting a stagnation for the Soviet economy. But contrary to popular belief, in this scenario, even with the war occurring, the Soviet Union still stays. This is because the tight grip on power and restriction of democracy doesn't let people express their negative feelings about the Union after their loss at war, and the new economic reforms would pull the economy out of stagnation while developing it. With economic restructuring by the USSR, the 90s and 2000s would not have been times of oligarchs robbing country resources, massive corruption from new politicians, crime rise, and mafia, but rather the Soviet economy going from a stagnation to a stable growth and lives of people improving on the economic front, instead of collapsing like they did when the Soviet Union fell. The benefits of this economic restructuring could even make people worry less about their lack of democracy, which would be the strategy of the Soviet leader, so he can grip power. Overall, the 90s and 2000s would be a period of economic growth and improvement of quality of life for the Soviet Union that transcends into the 2010s. Benefits of the Soviet Union fool you, since the Cold War would still be raging and at a high level where world tensions would be high. The Soviet Union and USA would keep trying to spread their influence. However, things would not be as tense as before, since due to the USSR's economic reforms, they would be accepting foreign investments as a way to expand their economy. However, still with a high level of tensions. So how would the Soviet Union look like? In summary, the Soviet Union with its changes would develop into an economic superpower, similar to what China is today. It will be very powerful financially, but it would still have little democracy, despite developing financially. The same would be for the nations under their control in the Eastern Bloc. They will enjoy financial benefits because of the USSR, but would lack political freedom. The Cold War will still rage on, but hopefully slow down due to financial reasons, since the Soviets opened themselves to foreign investments. This will reduce chances of all-out wars occurring, but not completely remove tensions between the nations. Overall, the Soviets would be economically powerful and successful, hopefully even allowing their citizens to travel the world. But very unfortunately, they would still be an authoritarian dictatorship. So although there will be massive economic benefits because of the economic restructure, there will still sadly be lack of political freedom and democracy.